Chapter 91. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The sun blazed across the sky, radiating intense power. Golden light blanketed nearly half the heavens. From a distance, it looked like fire clouds and gold were battling for dominance. Then, like a torrential golden waterfall, that power surged towards Hod. It felt like pure destruction. The attack slammed down. Everyone was stunned. The impact of that one blow shook the entire earth. Boss, the attack registered a magnitude 10 earthquake. Friday reported, the force was so overwhelming, they couldn't risk bringing the Quinjet any closer. Even their current position was dangerous. That spear, is that the meteor lance? Thor blurted out, shocked. His father was pulling out all the stops. Hardly anyone had ever seen the legendary meteor lance, the lost spear of heaven. He never imagined Odin would resort to such a weapon. He'd only heard his mother mention that Odin's ultimate attack was the meteor lance, but Odin almost never used it because it was a last resort. Unleashing the meteor lance required almost all of his energy. Rumor had it that Odin only used it when victory was impossible otherwise. It was said it could even pierce the planet. Hod. Hela, the goddess of death, gasped when she saw the spear. She leaped into the air, gathering green energy in her hands. The attack was too powerful. She had to intervene to help Hod, but as soon as she was airborne, the force's shockwave slammed into her. Her gathered energy couldn't even withstand the aftermath of the blow. This was Odin at full power. She couldn't block it. Besides, she was still seriously injured, making movement difficult. Trying to stop Odin's meteor lance at full strength was a pipe dream. Even in her prime, she could only barely withstand the aftershocks. Back on the Quinjet. What do we do? Steve asked, his face grim. Technically, they should side with Hood. At least Hood was protecting the Earth, while Odin clearly didn't care. Besides, Hood was Wanda's boyfriend. If it hadn't been for him, they would have fallen apart. That was why Steve had decided to support Hood. What can we do? You think we can even touch this fight? Tony said, shaking his head with a frustrated sigh. Even with all his armor deployed, they couldn't get involved. This was a battle beyond the Avengers. All they could do was wait. It was a powerless feeling, but they had no choice. That was reality. Without the necessary strength, they were just ants. Let me out. Wanda demanded, rushing to the Quinjet's rear exit, ready to jump. She could feel the incredible power, and she feared for Hood. He always seemed invincible, but this was different. This was Odin, king of the gods. She couldn't stand by and do nothing. Wanda. Calm down. Tony yelled, blocking her from opening the door. Get out of my way. I have to help my boyfriend. That she didn't care what happened to her. She couldn't bear to see Hood in danger, even if it meant dying together. She had her chaos magic. Even a little bit of power might help ease the pressure on Hood. If you really want to help him, stay out of it. Tony argued, his voice tight. He can't afford to be distracted right now. Your showing up will only distract him. Tony understood the situation. He didn't know if Hood could win, but all they could do was watch. It wasn't that they didn't want to help, but butting in would likely complicate things. Besides, their combined strength couldn't match Odin's. Wanda jumping in wouldn't make a difference. But Wanda started, her voice choked with emotion. Wanda, I know you're worried, but you have to think about this. Rhodey added, boom. Odin's full-force attack slammed into Hood. The shot filled the world with golden light. The light surged like a beam, instantly blasting towards Hood. Everything around him warped under the pressure. The black particles that had swirled like dark threads were swept away by the force. It looked like a cloud of black mist scattering before the golden light. This attack could destroy the world. The earth buckled, and the terrifying energy instantly withered and annihilated all the surrounding vegetation. The entire northern hemisphere trembled. The ocean surged violently, creating massive tsunamis that rose dozens of meters high. Sea creatures fled for the depths, but were still swept up by the devastating force. A tsunami formed off the east coast. Everyone in the northern hemisphere felt the tremor. It only lasted a moment, but people stumbled and struggled to stay on their feet. Vehicles swerved and crashed into each other. No one cared. They instinctively looked up to see a beam of golden light piercing the sky, seemingly connecting heaven and earth. The sight triggered instant panic. It felt like the end of the world. What the hell is happening? Is this the apocalypse? What is that golden light? People in New York saw it clearly. The light seemed to pierce the sky itself, reaching beyond comprehension. All they could see was golden light slicing through the sky. Around the light, the clouds swirled into a vortex. When the light dissipated, the magic spear had torn a massive canyon across the desolate landscape, reaching deep into the earth. A raging heat wave rolled out. Even though it was just the aftermath, the gigantic crater was filled with melted rock and scorched earth. It looked as though it had been hit by countless bombs. The canyon stretched endlessly, yet, above it, amidst the swirling heat, stood a figure, and he wore an easy smile. I have to admit, that was an interesting move. Almost singed me. Hod stepped forward, brushing off the dust. Too bad it wasn't strong enough. Honestly, he could have dodged it, but half the earth would have been destroyed. So, he chose to stand and face the blast, wanting to test its power. Odin was strong. If he hadn't acquired the extra fragment of the Phoenix Force, he might not have been able to stop it, but the world was what it was. The heck? Hood blocked it. Steve exclaimed, his eyes wide. Hood had taken that hit head-on. Not only that, he hadn't even moved. His clothes were clean. That guy's stronger than Odin. Tony whispered, awestruck. The power was incredible, beyond anything he could imagine. It was no longer human. He'd always known Hood was powerful, but he never thought he could survive a blow like that without a scratch. Hood was on a different level. He really blocked it. He actually did it. Wanda said, covering her mouth, her eyes glistening. She'd been convinced Hood was about to die, but he was unscathed. His power far exceeded her wildest dreams. This was Odin, king of the gods. The strongest being in existence. How? That's impossible. The meteor spear. Even gods can't withstand it. It's supposed to pierce anything, but it had no effect on Hod. Hela stammered, her mind reeling. She'd seen Odin battle the gods. The meteor spear had been his ultimate weapon, always deciding the outcome, but his most trusted attack hadn't even fazed Hod. She looked at Hood, her eyes filled with conflicted emotions. Even with that, no one could touch him. She couldn't believe she was following someone so powerful. Even Odin, whom she hated, was nothing compared to Hood. Impossible. Am I hallucinating? There's no way. My father's the strongest. How could that guy stop him? Did he use some kind of demonic power? Even demons couldn't block it that easily. Thor shouted in disbelief. He couldn't accept that his invincible father had lost. So strong. Odin's energy drained away after the attack, and his youthful appearance faded, making him look years older. He planted the spear of eternity in the ground, his legs weak. As he neared death, his divine power was fading. He had used all his Odin force. He looked up at the man in the sky, unable to understand how he'd blocked it. It was the attack he was most proud of, but it couldn't even scratch a Midgardian. He'd faced countless enemies, but never felt so weak. He'd realized it from the start. The man hadn't bothered to attack, like a powerful opponent letting him make the first move. He'd looked at him with amusement. Even when his indestructible fist connected, he was met with an unyielding body. He could easily destroy vibranium, but he couldn't even dent this man. But Hood was unfazed. You lost. Hood landed, strolling casually towards Odin as if in his own backyard, his hands in his pockets. A smile played on his lips, like a gentle greeting. Bang. I did lose. Odin looked defeated. He knelt before Hood with a thud, though he didn't want to admit it. The truth was undeniable. As Odin knelt, the atmosphere went rigid. Thor looked defeated, but still he followed his father's example, begrudgingly kneeling before Hod. Odin's army knelt as well. Since you've all failed, Hela will be the new queen of Asgard. Hod announced calmly. He wasn't making the announcement to hurt the people of the god realm. He wanted to help them survive the coming crisis. Hela would be a good ruler now. More importantly, it might prevent Ragnarok. He didn't want to be bothered with saving these so-called gods later on. Even though Hela had always hated Odin, it didn't mean she didn't know what needed to be done. Very well. Odin looked at Hela, standing behind Hood, his eyes filled with a mix of sadness, fatigue, and other indescribable emotions. He supported himself as he slowly rose, handing the spear of eternity to Hela. I was wrong. Maybe you were right all along. Odin hung his head. Hela took the spear of eternity. Looking at the weapon in her hand, she glanced at Hood, her eyes filled with complexity. Hod, I'll head out for now. Her eyes flashed with a peculiar light. Don't worry, I'll be back after I've taken care of things. After Hood nodded, she gathered her forces, opened the Bifrost and teleported away. Hood watched them leave. Hod, a familiar voice called from behind. Hood turned to see Wanda flying towards him. She pounced on him, wrapping her arms around him like an octopus. Wanda, Hood said, surprised by the warmth and softness in his arms. How long have you been here? Almost from the beginning, Wanda said, pouting. With all the commotion, it's hard not to notice. The authorities are already deploying. Deploying? Hood looked puzzled. Yeah, Tony notified the authorities and banned anyone from entering the area. Wanda said seriously, the noise was too much to ignore. Wait, are the others here, too? Hood asked suddenly. Wanda was here. Were the other Avengers here, too? Chapter 92. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Want me to bring them over? Wanda's eyes lit up, a look of pure joy on her face. She'd been wrestling with this. Hood's got Gwen now, so it felt kinda weird to just spring it on everyone, but if Hood's the one to introduce himself, that changes everything. It means he wants to meet her friends, and she doesn't have to keep it a secret anymore. Who doesn't want their boyfriend to proudly introduce them? So, after he asked, Wanda just stared at Hood. She was a little worried he'd say no, but she really wanted her friend's blessing. Nobody knows who Hood really is. It'd be amazing if he took the initiative to tell them. Tony, Steve, Natasha, they're her best friends. It would be awesome if they all knew Hood. Whatever you want. Hood wasn't overthinking it. He'd kept his identity under wraps mainly for Wanda's sake, plus, he didn't want the attention. Dealing with all that would be a headache. He came to this world to kick back and enjoy life, not to bust his butt all the time. Take Tony, for example. If Tony hadn't become Iron Man, he'd probably still be living it up with booze and babes. Everyone's got their own path, but Hood knew that wasn't for him. He only dealt with Dormammu because he promised the Ancient One he'd look after Steven. Otherwise, he wouldn't have bothered going to the Dark Dimension. He hates drama, of course. If there's a big, important win involved, he doesn't mind so much. After all, the system rewards big moves. Oh. Wanda's excitement deflated, replaced by disappointment. She thought Hood was eager to introduce himself, but it sounded like he was just being polite, without any real feeling. She always thought good relationships are built on openness and sharing your life with each other, but Hood didn't seem to think that way, or even care. What's wrong? You don't seem happy. Hood noticed her disappointment right away, sounding puzzled. Wanda's emotions were pretty easy to read. Nothing. Wanda shook her head. The others are handling logistics now. That's not my department, so I came over here. Since Hood wasn't pushing it, maybe they weren't as close as she thought, and as much as she wanted Hood to be part of her crew, she wouldn't force it. The other Avengers weren't here because they were freaked out by Hood's power. They wanted to know who he was, but he was so powerful, and he hid his face last time. No way they'd risk showing up on their own. If this mystery man got angry, they'd be toast. So, the logistics thing was just an excuse. They didn't want to create a powerful, unbeatable enemy. To them, this guy was a wild card, but stable for now. If he got mad because they found out who he was, the whole Avengers team couldn't stand a chance. Plus, they saw him hand Odin his butt. Even those gods were bowing down to this guy. Enough said. So, yeah, that's why they weren't here. Got it. That's awesome. It's been too long. Hood grinned, eyes sparkling. He stepped forward and hugged Wanda. He'd mostly been tied up with chores lately. He hadn't even had a chance to really chill with Gwen. Finally seeing Wanda, he couldn't help but miss her. Miss me? Wanda's low mood was lifted by the hug. She'd missed Hood a ton these past few weeks, but there were always a million little things going on with the Avengers. Barely any actual fighting, just endless errands. You know I do. Hood gave Wanda a suggestive look, and she knew exactly what he meant. You're such a perv. You're not thinking about me at all. Wanda thought to herself, but she was happy. Hood was thinking about her, in his own way. Hey, have you eaten? Hood put his arm around Wanda's waist, a glint in his eyes. I could whip up some American classics, like a hot dog sandwich and milk. Wanda blushed instantly. Looking at Hood so close, she could only nod. She'd learned a trick from Natasha: if you don't feed them enough, they'll wander off to grab a snack. Gotta make sure they eat at home, so they won't go out. Should we head back, then? Hood noticed Wanda's shyness and his face lit up. The more comfortable they got, the more enthusiastic Wanda became. It was exciting. Wanda glanced nervously at the cops nearby, clearly hesitant. She was here to negotiate, but there was still a ton of work to do at the scene. This battle was massive. Besides everything else, a bunch of people in New York were hurt by the shockwaves. Even cars got totaled because of the crazy vibrations, and the ocean needed a lot of attention too. This fight had affected everyone. It's cool. Tony and the others got this. Wanda didn't spell it out, but he knew what she was thinking. Without a word, he drew a circle in the air and conjured up a golden portal. Let's go. Before Wanda could say anything, he swept her into his arms and walked through into the manor. Guess the deal didn't go through. In the distance, Tony watched the two figures disappear into the portal, shaking his head. They sent Wanda over to see if she could put in a good word. He really wanted to get this mystery man to join the Avengers. He was way more powerful than they imagined. If they could bring him on board, they wouldn't have to sweat the next crisis. Figures. Someone like that wouldn't want to be part of our little game. Rhodes shrugged beside him, looking unsurprised. He already figured the guy had everything he wanted. With that kind of power, money, status, and fame were all within reach. Joining the Avengers would just be extra baggage. It's still a bummer, though. Imagine having that kind of power protecting the Earth. Steve sat on a fallen tree, shaking his head sadly. He was disappointed. With great power comes great responsibility, right? But this guy clearly didn't want to play along. Alright, guys, we've got a million things to take care of. Tony clapped his hands and turned toward the Quinjet. The police had the scene under control, and nobody was hurt around here, so they should head out to help with relief efforts. Inside the manor, Lorna was sprawled on the sofa in a short skirt, watching TV and humming, swinging her legs. This was the life. Eat whatever she wanted. Buzz. Lorna. With a flash, Lorna turned to see Hood holding Wanda as they stepped through the portal into the living room. Mr. Hood. Sis. Lorna froze. She didn't expect Hood to be back, much less catch her chilling like this. She forgot all about her potato chips and sat up straight, blushing. Relax, you don't have to be so jumpy. Hood chuckled. Lorna was kind of adorable. She'd been here for a while, but she never really relaxed around him. If he was home, she mostly stayed in her room. It was rare to catch her so relaxed in the living room. Lorna. Wanda looked at her half-sister, a mixture of emotions in her eyes. Being around her sister felt special, a blood connection, a feeling of familiarity. Sis. Lorna was obviously tense. She didn't know how to act around family. She was happy, but scared too, like she was about to be abandoned. Go hang out with your sister. Hood playfully slapped Wanda on the butt with a smile. Wanda's face went red instantly. She glared at Hood, annoyed. Hey. Your sister's right here. Lorna looked mortified when she saw the butt slap, but it also made Wanda feel a lot more relaxed. The two sat on the sofa and talked about their lives. They had a lot in common. Both of them were screwed over by Hydra. After half an hour, Lorna suddenly remembered something and smacked her forehead. Mr. Hood, sis, you guys haven't eaten yet, have you? Nope. Wanda shook her head. They rushed over right after the fight, so they hadn't eaten anything. Hood, on the other hand, looked strange. Unsettled. He had a bad feeling. I cooked. Perfect timing for you and Mr. Hood to try it. Lorna's words sealed Hood's fate. He knew it was coming, but it still felt like a punch to the gut. Hood looked at Lorna's excitement and sighed. He couldn't say no. It was a gift from Lorna, after all, and Wanda was here, so he couldn't refuse. Lorna led them to the dining room and quickly pulled out all the food from the insulated container. She'd made 10 dishes. They weren't amazing, but they were edible, and they looked way better than last time. Lorna, you made all this? Wanda was impressed. She was no cook herself, she never expected her sister to be so good at it. Well, Sister Imelda helped a lot. Lorna scratched her head, embarrassed. When she first started, most of the food was burnt or raw. Imelda was the reason these dishes were even possible. Lorna's really improved. Hood was overjoyed, almost crying. He was giving Imelda a raise, no matter what. Without her, Lorna's cooking KDA would be +2 today. Everyone had a blast at dinner. Wanda couldn't help but sneak a glance at Hood. In the light, his sharp face seemed softer. She slipped her hand onto his leg. She didn't know how long it had been, but she finally felt at home again. Hood had given her all of this. Hood felt the slender hand and met Wanda's eyes. A knowing look crossed his face. Wanda was being a little more forward than usual. Lorna, why don't you get started on the dishes? Your sister and I are going upstairs to do some work. Lorna blinked. Work? What work? Before she could ask, Hood grabbed Wanda and hurried upstairs. Mr. Hood and his sister are so in love. Lorna watched them go, envious, but as long as her sister was happy, she was happy. Hood, can we go on a trip somewhere in a few days? Wanda stretched, the tension leaving her body. Sure. Where do you want to go? Hood agreed without thinking. He was free anyway, he might as well get out of town with Wanda and see what happens. I want to go to Westview. I saw it driving by once. It's so pretty, and the cherry blossoms were in bloom. Wanda shared her idea. Hood was surprised she wanted to go to Westview. In the comics, Westview was where Wanda dreamed of settling down and starting a family with her lover. She must have really accepted him. We can drive there and enjoy the scenery. Wanda took Hood's hand and gave him a pleading look. Hood nodded, letting her take the lead. As the sun set, Hood led Wanda to the balcony to watch the sunset, perfect spot for it. Suddenly, the manor's alarm blared. Master, there is an intruder outside. The Red Queen's voice startled them. Intruder? Hood focused and scanned the grounds. He saw Gwen in her ghost spider suit stumbling against the wall. She looked rough. She barely got over the wall before she collapsed. It's Gwen. She's not doing so hot. Hood and Wanda jumped up and rushed downstairs to find her. Chapter 93. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the yard, Gwen lay on the ground, groaning, her battle suit covered in dust. Even her hood had a crack in it, clearly from a fight. Gwen, Hood rushed over and helped her up. Wanda followed them into the messy room. Hood gently removed Gwen's hood after laying her on the bed. Sweat plastered her hair to her face, which was contorted in pain. Her body twitched, and bruises marred her fair skin. Damn it! Who did this? Veins throbbed on Hood's forehead. He couldn't believe someone would attack Gwen, especially with such serious injuries. He suspected even her internal organs were damaged. It was clear Gwen made it back on sheer willpower. She's in so much pain. Wanda gritted her teeth, feeling distressed. Whoever did this was brutal. Gwen wouldn't be hurt this badly otherwise. Hood took Gwen's hand, and the horse charm on his right hand began to glow. Green energy flowed into her body through his touch. Gwen's injury started to heal rapidly with the charm's energy. Her pained expression eased as the energy took effect. Lorna, go get her some water. Wanda said, turning to Lorna. She had many questions but knew now wasn't the time. Besides, she didn't know what happened to Gwen to get her this hurt. As the energy mended her, Gwen suddenly opened her eyes. Her pupils were wide with fear, but the moment she saw Hood, the fear vanished. Hood, Gwen threw herself into his arms, her eyes instantly welling up, even her voice trembled. This enemy had been so terrifying, she thought she wouldn't make it back. Wanda watched, any jealousy she felt gone. She was just a kid. At least Wanda had the Avengers, but Gwen always had to protect people on her own. It's okay, it's okay. Hood gently patted Gwen's back, comforting her. He could see she was terrified. I almost didn't make it. Gwen's nose twitched as she sobbed. She truly thought she was going to die, and barely conscious, she pushed herself toward Hood. Thankfully, she'd made it just in time. What happened? After a moment, Hood asked about what happened. Whoever attacked Gwen would pay, but first, he needed to know what went down. I've been investigating a guy called Vulture. I found a lead after school, but I was ambushed while following him. Gwen, eyes red, told him everything. The guy wasn't strong up close, but he could fly. He also had a bunch of different weapons, which freaked her out. She almost died. He'd only won because the guy got careless. Vulture. Hood was stunned. This world was different than he imagined, but he never expected to meet Vulture here. Vulture's name was Adrian Toombs. He ran a recycling company. Hood was surprised because Vulture was Liz Toombs' dad. Liz was Peter Parker's crush in another world, and Vulture was kind of a loser. He'd spent a ton of money getting government approval to recycle chittary waste, then he used the waste to study alien tech and make money, but the damage control department, led by Stark Industries, cancelled his contract. He faced bankruptcy, so he started hating the Avengers and hiding the chittary waste, and now Gwen ran into him. She was good, but Vulture's suit was better. It could fly and had other tricks. He wouldn't stand a chance against Tony, but Gwen didn't have a shot. Vulture, huh? Wanda gritted her teeth, anger in her voice. Don't worry, I'll help you take him down. Gwen might have been competition, but that didn't matter now. She felt bad for her. She looked into Gwen's background and knew what she'd been through. So young, and so much pressure, taking care of her dad and fighting bad guys, way too much for a college kid. You will? Hood was surprised. He didn't expect Wanda to volunteer. Their relationship was complicated. What? Shocked, Wanda crossed her arms, showing off her chest. I'm not petty. One thing at a time. Helping Gwen doesn't mean I want a three-way. She wasn't stupid. She figured out Gwen was Ghost Spider, and after dealing with the barbarians, they were probably going on dates. It ticked her off, but she didn't blame Gwen. Hood was a playboy who wouldn't settle down. Haha. Hood scratched his head, embarrassed. Gwen, you hungry? He changed the subject. Yeah, I want steak. Now that she was better, Gwen forgot everything around Hood. She was like a kid, plus, she didn't know how to face Wanda. In the park, she almost told Wanda how she felt, but then Hela showed up, and she never got the chance. Now Wanda was here, and she couldn't say a thing. Okay, I'll make it for you. Hood almost ruffled Gwen's hair, but seeing Wanda, he stopped himself and smiled. Steak was easy. He made it in a few minutes. Ah, I'm stuffed. Gwen smiled, eyes crinkling. She'd been craving Hood's cooking, but school and fighting crime kept her busy. Now she finally got to enjoy it. Take a shower when you're done. Wanda smiled at Gwen. Her suit was covered in dust, and those tight suits were uncomfortable to wear all the time. Okay. Gwen nodded, smiling. She felt gross, and she'd sweated a ton. After Gwen changed, Wanda took the suit and headed to the laundry room. She washed it, checked for damage, and asked the maid to fix it. No way. As Wanda put Gwen's suit in the washer, she noticed something. There were stitches in the crotch. Suddenly, she remembered that night. Could it be? She froze, lifting a corner. The thread matched, but up close, you could still see the stitches. It was the same tear from the last time she and Hood were together. So, the last time Wanda's face turned red. She couldn't believe this was happening. Hood. Wanda took a deep breath, the sound forced out. She understood now why Hood was acting like he was hopped up on adrenaline. It was Gwen's suit, and he'd snuck it in. What's wrong? Hood was walking downstairs and heard Wanda's voice. He froze when he saw the spider suit in her hand. My dear Hood, can you explain this uniform? Wanda smiled tightly, shaking the suit. What's going on? I forgot to tell Imelda to clean up the room. Hood scratched his head, forcing a smile and trying to run, but Wanda appeared in front of him. That wouldn't be the day. Wanda lowered the suit, showing the stitches. No wonder you were having so much fun. You could hear the anger and shyness in her voice. Her face was red, even her ears were pink. This wasn't cosplay, it was a live performance in a combat suit. And Gwen wore it again. Wanda's expression darkened. This. Hood hesitated, scratching his head. The evidence was right there. Who knew this would happen? He didn't expect Gwen to patch it up. If he knew, he never would have given it back. So that was the suit I wore that night. I wondered where it went. Wanda's tone was furious. You could hear her grinding her teeth. Calm down, it was your choice, and you said it was great. Hood raised his hand, his lips twitching. besides, didn't you have fun too? That he couldn't help it, he loved how embarrassed Wanda was. Hood. Wanda slapped Hood, don't say it, that she couldn't imagine what would happen if Gwen found out, she'd never live it down. You can wear it again if you want. Hood turned and ran. They chased each other through the house. Lorna swung her legs in the living room, sighing, those two have a good relationship. In the guest room, Gwen's injuries were healed, but she was exhausted, and had slept for hours. She opened the door groggily. Wanda, on the sofa, turned and looked at her. Gwen's fair skin turned pink. What's wrong? Gwen touched her face, looking at herself. Why was Wanda staring at her? Nothing. Wanda waved her hands nervously. Hood, I want revenge on Vulture. Gwen said through gritted teeth. Is my suit clean? That she wasn't going to let him get away with this. Okay. Hood patted Wanda and said with a smirk, where's the suit? Get it for Gwen. You. Wanda glared at Hood, remembering what she did in the suit, and her face burned. Okay. She went to the laundry room, took out the suit, and her heart raced when she saw the spot. She couldn't believe she'd done that without realizing it. What's wrong? Gwen looked at Wanda, confused. Wanda seemed hesitant. Why don't you change into a different suit? Wanda pleaded. This suit was. She felt embarrassed just thinking about it, even though it was a while ago. She'd always remember that night, and the person responsible was downstairs. She blushed. It's fine, as long as it works. Gwen shook her head. She sniffed the suit and said, Hey, Hood, did you use lavender detergent this time? Cough cough cough. Hood, drinking coffee, coughed, face red. Wanda pinched Hood's waist. Damn Hood. He was a pervert. If she knew it was Gwen's suit, she never would have worn it. And he lied about it being a cosplay suit. He knew what he was doing. Gwen, where are we going first? Hood suppressed his smile and waited for Gwen to change before heading out. The lead I found is in the Grundfos warehouse in Queens. This time, it was Queen's turn to suffer. Hood nodded and made a gesture. A dimensional door opened. A warehouse appeared on the other side. Yes. That's it. Gwen gritted her teeth and went through the door. Hood stretched and said, Let's go. Chapter 94. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The warehouse was tucked away in the suburbs, quiet as could be. Gwen scanned the area, her eyes sharp. Relax, nobody's around, Hod assured her. He could sense it. The warehouse felt deserted. He's not here. Gwen frowned. According to her intel, Vulture should have been holed up in this warehouse. Let's check inside, Hod said, heading for the door. After a couple of steps, a smirk crept across his face. Guess this guy's pretty jumpy. What's up? Gwen asked, confused. Hod gestured, and the dirt beside the door started to churn. Soon, 5 anti-personnel mines were exposed. He booby-trapped his own warehouse. Gwen's eyes widened. If it weren't for Hod, she might have triggered one. She hadn't expected Vulture to be this paranoid. Looks like Vulture's got some interesting habits. Hod crushed the detonator with his hand and tossed the deactivated mines aside. Gotta give him credit, he knows his weaknesses. That's why he's so cautious, even in his own backyard. Not a soul in sight. The warehouse door was a classic double door, secured with a massive padlock, as big as your head. Clearly, whatever was inside was important to Vulture. Before Hod could even react, Wanda used her chaos magic to twist the lock into a blob of putty. Hod pushed the doors open, revealing rows of military green crates. What's all this? Gwen walked over and opened one. Inside, she found a pile of broken weapon parts. The markings identified them as discarded Chitauri tech. He's cobbling together weapons from Chitauri scraps. Gwen exclaimed. That explained where Vulture was getting his firepower. It's more than that, Hod said, hooking his index finger slightly. Suddenly, every crate in the warehouse sprang open. Most contained the same Chitauri debris. Check this out. Gwen called from the southeast corner, her eyes wide. Inside those crates were high-tech weapons. He actually managed to make these things work. Wanda approached the crates, her expression darkening. Looks like Vulture's the one Tony's been tracking for arms smuggling, that she knew Tony had been losing sleep over these smuggled weapons. Since the weapons used were all modified from the Chitauri leftovers, their firepower had been seriously amplified, and each batch that slipped out of the country had caused civilian casualties overseas, but Vulture was good at hiding his movements, and Tony couldn't get ahead of them. After all, the guy was moving the goods in secret, and he didn't even have enough time to react. If you're after smuggled weapons, this is probably the stash you're looking for, Gwen said, her voice serious. She'd been tracking Vulture and knew he was involved in smuggling, but she hadn't found this location before, so she wasn't sure what he was moving. Looks like we're killing two birds with one stone, Wanda said with a smile. Tony can stop chasing shadows. The Vulture had been keeping things buried too deep, now it's good, they can solve it all at once. Where'd he run off to? Gwen wondered, frustrated. She couldn't just wait around forever. Let's check downstairs, Hod announced. There's something underneath. Without his senses, he never would have guessed Vulture had a hidden basement. Hod led them to a filthy, black carpet. He yanked it back, revealing a steel door underneath. It was definitely the entrance to a basement. It's a combination lock, Gwen said, examining the panel. She frowned. A combination lock meant they'd be stuck without the code. Password? Hod asked, activating his Bluetooth headset. Red Queen, crack this code. They could force it open, but it was networked. A forced entry would probably trigger an alarm. Done, Master. Red Queen replied instantly, the correct code automatically entering. Mr. Hodder, how'd you do that? Gwen asked, amazed. It's just AI, Hod said, not elaborating on Red Queen's origins. Gwen didn't push it. Once the door unlocked, she headed inside. As the lights flickered on, the room came into view. The basement was lined with steel and crammed with equipment and materials. It was clearly an underground workshop, maybe 300 square meters. Cluttered, but filled with the parts of various weapons, most of which could be recognized at a glance. Those materials were all parts of various weapons. Some weapons haven't been assembled, but it can be seen that these weapons are clearly the weapon materials of the Chitauri. He's been building these weapons down here, Wanda said, shocked. Chitauri weapons were incredibly complex. The fact that Vulture could assemble them on his own was a feat. On some level, Vulture was a genius. The Chitauri were an alien civilization, their tech light years ahead of Earth's. Laser cannon, self-propelled ballistic sight, laser gun. Hod said, rattling off the names as he examined the scattered components. He was surprised to see how much of this was pieced together, even modified from scratch. Over here. Gwen called from a computer terminal. They joined her and looked at the screen. Bank robbery plan. That the title made everything click. Vulture was planning a heist. They're moving tonight, but there are too many banks around here to pin it down, Gwen said, looking at the plan with a headache. It included escape routes and the logistics of fencing stolen goods. The target was a bank in Queens, but the files only contained blueprints of bank vaults. Not enough to identify the specific location. I'll let Tony know, Wanda suggested. Tony could probably use Stark Tech to pinpoint the target. Hold on, I've got this, Hod said, stopping Wanda. Red Queen, locate Vulture's current position. He could use his senses, but it would be faster with Red Queen. All she needed was a webcam. Master, located. Vulture is in the alley to the right of the Gesk Bank branch, Red Queen reported almost instantly. Got him. Should I take him out? Hod asked, turning to Gwen. If he did it, he could vaporize him. I want him myself. Gwen said, her face set. She wouldn't have been caught off guard if it hadn't been for Vulture's sneak attack. She wasn't going to hide in Hod's shadow anymore. Outside the Gesk Bank in Queens, 5 figures huddled in the alley. One of them was hard to miss, a pair of mechanical wings spread from his back, his coat bristled with weaponry, and a mask resembling a medieval plague doctor covered his face. The others held weapons and waited for Vulture's orders, their expressions grim. "Everybody set?" Vulture asked, checking his watch. When the others nodded, he pressed a button, *ding*. The bank's electronic doors slid open. The opening of this door did not attract anyone's attention in the middle of the night. It was a program specially set by Vulture. As long as he pressed the button, all nearby connections would be cut off immediately. This would prevent the police from watching all nearby surveillance in real time. Not only that, it could also open all the network doors in the bank by itself. "Boss, you're the best." One of the crew blurted out. This would save them a lot of effort. Apart from anything else, at least they didn't have to worry about being discovered in the short term. "Save it," Vulture growled, leading the way into the bank. "We've got 10 minutes. Although the camera has been hacked, the police's internal detection system is not for show. They will definitely be discovered in 10 minutes, and the nearest police station is only 8 minutes away, so this must be resolved within 20 minutes to ensure a safe departure." Vulture had studied the blueprints, and they reached the vault without any trouble. The other 4 didn't need to be told. They immediately planted explosives on the vault door. *boom*. The door exploded, revealing rows of safety deposit boxes. "Boss! We're gonna be rich!" They cheered, rushing inside. While the bank's cash deposits were moved out at night, this branch specialized in storing valuables. These personal belongings are priceless, even those luxury jewels are countless. "Cut the chatter, move it." Vulture snapped. He strode to one of the safety deposit boxes. His purpose this time was not just for money, because if it was money, he could sell weapons. His main purpose was that a shareholder of Stark Company hid some secrets here, and his target was naturally this information. Just as he was about to grab it, he heard footsteps outside the vault. "Looks like you're moving fast," Hod said, walking in with Wanda and Gwen. Seeing the mess, Hod sighed. After all, the work efficiency was too fast. If it was implemented according to the planned plan, it would have taken less than 3 minutes to open the vault door. Even professional robbers would never be faster than them. "Vulture, you're going down," Gwen said, dropping into a fighting stance. Well, Ghost Spider. "I thought you were dead," Vulture said, his voice muffled by the mask. "Not today," Gwen said, gritting her teeth. She wouldn't underestimate him again. Moreover, this was in the vault. Although the space was large, it was much better than being on the street. At least she could handle the Vulture's flying ability. "Hold up, are you Hod from Stark?" Vulture said, noticing Hod for the first time. He was extremely familiar with Stark Industries. He had memorized all the shareholders' information firmly in his mind. "You want an autograph?" Hod asked, smirking. "Die!" Vulture screamed, lunging forward, but before he could get close, Gwen had webbed his wings to the ground. As for the other 4, they grabbed the weapons Vulture had given them. A crimson light flashed, and the weapons melted in their hands. In a heartbeat, the 4 were reduced to ashes. "Damn it!" Vulture cursed. If they had reacted faster, things would have been different. But it was too late. He had just picked someone to take the blame. To make matters worse, Gwen knew his weakness. He was immediately stuck his wings, and the next second, Gwen had come behind him through the wall. Crack, Gwen ripped the wings off his back. Chapter 95. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Inside the vault, Vulture crashed to the ground, his mask ripped off and tossed aside. His chest heaved, his eyes dim. He tried to blast his way out with the armor, but Scarlet Witch had yanked him back with a flick of her wrist, leading to a one-sided beatdown. In that tight space, his wings were useless, especially since Gwen had already wrecked them. "Gwen, you're getting stronger," Hodder said, ruffling her hair. Gwen's performance had blown him away. She was quicker than ever, using the terrain and her webbing to tie Vulture in knots. In a straight fight, she was way stronger than him. "Hodder." Wanda pouted, noticing Hodder's affection for Gwen. That used to be her thing. "What's up?" Hodder asked, pulling Wanda into a hug. He grinned, enjoying the moment. "You dog." Wanda playfully twisted his side, knowing he was probably thinking something inappropriate. She wouldn't let him get away with it. So, what do we do with this guy? Gwen asked, nodding toward the grounded vulture. They couldn't just leave him there. Well. Hodder started to answer, just as he was debating whether to call the cops. Sirens wailed outside. The police are here. Gwen exclaimed, looking towards the exit. That saves us the trouble, Wanda said with a smile. The bank doors were wide open, and who knew who might wander in. This was New York, after all. Let's bounce, Hodder said, waving his hand. A golden portal shimmered into existence. He scooped up Gwen and Wanda, stepping into the gateway. No way he was letting them get stuck giving interviews. This was valuable quality time they could be using. The cops would handle Vulture. The next day, the Manor's big-screen TV blared a news report. Scarlet Witch and Ghost Spider team up to bust criminals. Close-up photos of Gwen and Wanda flashed across the screen. I'm surprised those cops were actually useful, Hodder remarked, watching the broadcast. It made sense they'd recognize Spider-Man, given all the webbing in the vault. But figuring out Scarlet Witch was there too. Impressive. Wanda's powers were different now. I wanted them to know I was involved. Wanda said proudly. The Avengers' reputation is on the mend, but we need to keep the good press coming. She'd planned this. Some people still didn't trust the Avengers, and she wanted them to know who was looking out for them, because who'd once told her heroes should let the world know when they do good things instead of being unknown. Gwen was different. She was still in school, so keeping a low profile was important so her ordinary life wouldn't be disturbed, plus, she wasn't making a living off being a hero. Our little Wanda's getting smart. Hodder grinned, sidling up to her. Should I give you a reward? Get lost. Wanda retorted. She'd teamed up with Gwen against Hood the night before, just to teach him a lesson. You two make a great team, though. Look at the buzz. Hodder pointed to the overwhelmingly positive online comments. Of course, my sister Gwen and I are besties. Wanda said, hugging Gwen. After their heart-to-heart, she'd let go of a lot of her resentment and had really come to love her sisterly Gwen. The media loves to hype things up, Gwen said. She was used to it. She'd been the subject of plenty of hype before, with people even impersonating her. Let's go to Westview for a few days, what do you say? Hodder suggested, leaning back on the sofa. He remembered Wanda wanting a vacation. Now seemed like the perfect time. Besides, Wanda deserved some RR, really. Wanda's eyes lit up, and she jumped on Hodder. She hadn't expected him to clear his schedule so soon. No time like the present, Hodder said, a sly grin on his face. He never forgot a promise. A total player, he would definitely do everything she wanted. And it would make both Gwen and Wanda happy. Awesome. Wanda kissed him on the cheek. Gwen, watching, shyly took Hodder's hand. She wanted to do the same, but she was still too bashful. Gwen, you in too? Hodder asked. He thought Gwen was off from school. Plus, the trip would bring them closer. Gwen started to agree, then hesitated. What's wrong? Hodder asked, concerned. I don't know if my parents will let me, Gwen admitted. She'd told them she was staying at a classmate's house last night. She couldn't get away with that again. It's cool. I'll ask them. Hodder said confidently, standing up. Let's go. We'll pick up your stuff, and I'll get permission. Gwen's family seemed reasonable. For this road trip, Hood left Bumblebee behind and chose an ELEM Palazzo. It was an RV, the most luxurious one out there, spacious and fully equipped. A smaller car wouldn't cut it. Plus, service areas were scarce in the US. As the car started, shimmering with gold, it attracted attention everywhere. ELEM Palazzos were rare. To avoid alarming Stacy and her husband, Wanda stayed in the car while Gwen and Hood went to Gwen's house. The door opened as soon as they knocked. Hodder, you're here. Helen's face lit up, then she spotted her daughter. Hi, Aunt Helen. Is Uncle George around? Hodder asked, noticing George wasn't home. He's at work, Helen said, smiling and inviting Hood inside, but as her eyes swept over them, a knowing smile flickered across her lips. Her sweet daughter had secretly learned to lie. She'd never usually spring something like a sleepover on them. She figured Gwen had spent the night at Hood's place. But she wasn't too worried. She liked Hood. George had checked him out, rich, handsome, and seemed to treat Gwen well. "Mom, I want to go on a trip with Hood for a few days," Gwen said nervously. She didn't know if her mother would approve. They were pretty strict. Otherwise, they wouldn't have freaked out when she didn't come home that one night. "Yes, Aunt Helen. I want to take Gwen on a trip. Her safety is my top priority," Hodder added. He knew Stacy and George were probably worried. "Okay, have fun." Gwen couldn't believe how easily Helen agreed. Helen trusted Hood. Plus, it was a holiday, and Gwen needed to get out. While George was in a coma, Gwen had been afraid to leave. Now, it was time for her to enjoy herself, and the time could help them get closer. After packing, Gwen climbed into the RV, excited, as ELEM and Palazzo pulled away. Hood, Wanda, Gwen, and Lorna headed for the highway. Westview was remote, a day's drive away. The drive passed through scenic plains, making the trip go by faster, and with Red Queen behind the wheel, there was nothing to worry about. A day later, ELEM and Palazzo parked in front of a villa that had been prepped ahead of time. "Wanda, you picked a great spot for some RR," Hodder said, sitting outside, admiring the view. This was the life. "Of course," Wanda said, relieved. "This vacation won't disappoint. The 9 realms, the lower part of the world tree, Nidavellir, rumble." A blue barrier shimmered across the sky. A mothership, a steel monster, loomed over Nidavellir, its 4 massive wings casting a shadow over the city. The dwarves looked up, terrified, unsure of what was happening. Bang! Before they could react, a shell slammed into a house in front of the fortress, reducing it to rubble. "Run! Enemies! What's going on?" The dwarves scattered in terror, fear etched on their faces. Though they were dwarves, adults reached Hulk-like proportions, but even they couldn't hide their fear. Boom! Another explosion rocked the city. 5 figures, leading an army, surrounded them. The dwarves tried to break through, but it was useless. "Brothers, charge!" One dwarf, weapon in hand, gritted his teeth and tried to force a path, but a tall, slender man with a refined air stepped forward. With a flick of his wrist, stones rose and formed spikes, impaling the dwarves, turning them into pincushions. In one move, dozens fell. "Damn it!" Another dwarf charged, weapon raised high, but before he could reach Ebony Maw, a piece of metal struck him. He crashed through 2 buildings, then a massive figure descended from the sky, crushing his chest. It was Black Dwarf, drawing his weapon with a cruel smile. Other dwarves tried to break through, but they were no match for the Black Order. Those who resisted were captured, then beheaded by Proxima Midnight. The gate of the fortress was smashed open from the inside. The giant dwarf fell to the ground, the earth trembling. The dwarf king Eitri cried out in pain. Then, a purple figure, a massive blade in hand, emerged. Each step was heavy and deliberate. It was Thanos. "Eitri, don't resist. Just build the Infinity Gauntlet." Thanos walked up to Eitri, raising his blade to the dwarf king's throat. "I will never help you." Eitri knows what Thanos intends to do. If he agrees, the universe will be plunged into chaos. "Even if I kill all the dwarves, Odin can no longer protect Nidavellir. Asgard is finished." Thanos saw through Eitri's thoughts, his eyes cold and ruthless. Before Eitri could answer, Thanos nodded to his henchman. A dwarf was dragged forward. With a flash of steel, his head hit the ground. "You!" Eitri, looking at the corpses, reluctantly agreed. Thanos stood on the highest peak of Nidavellir, surveying the destruction. Behind him stood his army and the Black Order. Ebony Maw knelt, presenting the Infinity Gauntlet. "I swear my allegiance to you until death. You are the most powerful being in the universe." Thanos took the gauntlet, a sneer on his face, and put it on. As the gauntlet clicked into place, a golden light erupted from Thanos' eyes. He clenched his fist. Next stop, the 9 realms. Chapter 96. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Shijing Town is the perfect place to unwind, even though it's the off-season. The surrounding farms are covered in wheat, the fields are awash in golden waves, making you feel like you've stumbled into paradise. Just being here lifts your spirits. Autumn's arrived, bringing a refreshing chill, just the right temperature. Ding. You've successfully checked in at a famous Marvel attraction. Reward, an endlessly refilling jug of peach and plum wine. Hodder was relaxing in the courtyard with a cup of pu'er tea. There's nothing better to do in a place like this than sip tea and enjoy the view. The serenity of it all made him sigh contentedly. He'd never been one for grand ambitions anyway. Being able to enjoy life was enough. He wasn't surprised by the system notification. After all, it's a system designed to enhance the enjoyment of life, so its definition of enjoyment is a bit unique. The system seems to reward him based on his mood. He gazed at the distant scenery, inhaling the rich aroma of the pu'er, a softness creeping into his eyes. With a flick of his wrist, an antique-looking jug materialized in his hand, a jug of peach and plum wine, unlimited refills. This crystal-clear wine is known to temper the body, strengthen internal organs, and nourish the system. Sounds promising. Hodder swirled the wine, a smile playing on his lips. If Wanda and the others were to try it, his own body has improved so much lately. Their bodies need to be prepped if they're going to keep up. As for him, wielding half the power of the audience master is enough to conquer the world. Hodder. Just as he set the jug down on the table, a lovely face peeked over his shoulder. 6, 5, 3. Hodder squinted against the sunlight, recognizing Wanda's face framed by strands of golden hair. Her lips were curved in a smile. What's up? Hod reached up, pulled her down, and planted a deep kiss on her before looking at her. You only truly appreciate life when you experience peace. He had indulged in every whim imaginable over the past year, and now he realized that this laid-back lifestyle was what he craved. Are you going to laze around here all day? Wanda pouted playfully, tucking a stray strand of golden hair behind her ear. Ever since they arrived, Hood had been lounging. While she appreciated the tranquility, she didn't want to waste her precious time just staring at the scenery. She wanted to explore. We're still tired from the trip. Let's rest tonight, and we can go exploring tomorrow morning, okay? Hod pinched her cheek affectionately. Even though he wasn't the one driving, they were still cooped up in the car the whole time, and Wanda and Lorna aren't as resilient as Gwen. Gwen's enhanced physique lets her bounce back quickly. Besides, being stuck in a car can get boring. Then can we at least hit up the hot springs for some relaxation? Wanda's eyes sparkled. She blinked her big eyes and gave him her most charming pout. She knew he was a softie. The gentler she was, the more likely he was to agree. Besides, she had already found a fantastic hot spring nearby. Word on the street is it can make the body feel much more relaxed. Hot springs? Hod was taken aback, then nodded thoughtfully. That actually sounds pretty good. I could use some unwinding. Mr. Hodder, what are you two whispering about? Lorna, accompanied by Gwen, came trotting over. Being of a similar age, Lorna and Gwen had become fast friends on the journey. We're debating whether to go to the hot spring resort in Shijing Town, Hodder explained to the two girls. Hot springs. Lorna's eyes widened, her long lashes making them look even bigger. We can go to a hot spring. She'd only seen them on TV before. The thought of visiting one was so exciting. I've never been to a hot spring before. I want to go too. Gwen chimed in, nodding enthusiastically. She'd read tons about them. Even though she won a beauty pageant, she never found the time to relax. She never had the chance to visit one. She never expected to stumble across one now. She was practically bouncing with excitement. It was obvious how happy she was. All right. Since everyone's on board, it's settled. With that, Hod grabbed his phone. Red Queen, book us some reservations. He had to say, with Red Queen around, he never had to sweat the small stuff. If it involved the internet, Red Queen could take care of it. Let's roll. Hod waved his hand, and a portal shimmered into existence. It led straight to the manor's garage. He slowly drove the bumblebee out. They had to navigate some rough roads to get there, and the Element Palazzo wasn't equipped for those kinds of conditions. At the Westview Town Hot Spring Resort, given Wanda's status, they weren't hanging around in the public area. Instead, Hod reserved a large private hot spring suite. Stepping inside, there was a small lounge area for dining and relaxing. Opening the sliding doors to the balcony revealed a large, walled-off space with views of Westview Town in the distance. Because of its location, the town appeared quite small. Mostly, what they could see was the dense birch ridge, and the golden leaves were beautiful. "Wow, this place is amazing." Gwen was practically buzzing with energy as she took in the view. Soaking in a hot spring while admiring the scenery was the pinnacle of relaxation. Her family wasn't exactly struggling, but she'd never been to such a luxurious space before. Honestly, it was way better than the promotional photos she saw online. The resort was so secluded that there was practically nobody there. All they could see were the forests covering the mountains. The woods were shady, and the occasional autumn breeze carried a refreshing scent. The rustling of the leaves was pleasing to the ear. "Gwen, Lorna, let's go change into our swimsuits." Wanda, acting like an older sister, urged them to get changed. After the girls disappeared to change, Hod simply threw on a pair of shorts in the lounge area. Removing his shirt revealed the powerful musculature beneath. He was the definition of looks, trim in clothes, buff without. The muscle definition was like something sculpted with a chisel. It was like the perfect statue. The muscle placement was like the golden ratio. Even if he showed up at a competition he'd win first prize. "What's taking them so long?" Hodder shook his head. "Boys and girls are so different. Guess I'll start without them." He slowly descended the steps into the hot spring. The warmth enveloped him the moment he stepped in. The water gently wrapped around him, every inch of his skin tingling with comfort. The water swayed gently. It felt like every stress and worry melted away with the ripples on the surface. The humming of the woods and the gurgling of the water nearby were soothing to the soul. He found a large, flat rock along the edge of the pool and settled down, savoring the peace and quiet. "That's right." Suddenly remembering something, Hod reached out. The jug of peach and plum wine instantly materialized. He also grabbed the wine glasses and tray he'd been rewarded with earlier. He set the tray on the water, and it swayed slightly. Popping the cap, he was greeted by a burst of fruity fragrance that transported him to an orchard. The delicious scent made him inhale deeply. "Yeah, this is great wine." Hodder wasted no time pouring himself a glass, watching the pink liquid cascade into the glass. Taking a sip, the sweetness of the peach washed over him. There was a slight kick to it, which was quickly overtaken by the fruity flavor. A warmth spread through his body. His body was too enhanced to feel much. "Looks like there's something special that's designed to enhance the body." Hodder quickly realized that this wine was better than he expected. A smile crept across his face. Maybe he should try soaking in a bath. He raised his right hand and continued to pour peach and plum wine into the water. The water slowly turned red. Hodder could feel a faint energy slowly penetrating his skin, then, slowly upgrading his physical fitness. "Sister Gwen, hurry up." Lorna, having changed, trotted in. To read the exciting novels, go to Falun Novel Network. She was wearing a cute one-piece swimsuit in dark black. While she was still flat, it was obvious that there was still room for growth. But turned towards the lounge area, Gwen and Wanda came in with red faces, pushing each other forward. Gwen was wearing a white two-piece swimsuit, showing off her figure. It wasn't huge, but it was pretty. Wanda's was different. She wore a sexy red swimsuit, and was ready to burst out, but her face was already red, and she carefully peeked at Hood. When they arrived at the hot spring, Hood unabashedly checked out Wanda. The swimsuit was bolder than he'd imagined. "Wanda, come sit over here next to me." Hodder patted the rock beside him, a mischievous glint in his eye. "I am not." Wanda knew what he was thinking just by his expression. She was never going. This was definitely not a good thing. TSK, I didn't expect it." Hod's eyes kept drifting towards Wanda. The faint scent of wine in the hot spring made Hod smile. "Pervert." Wanda blushed and looked away. Hod looked at the other two. Each of them had his own merits. Gwen was shy and curled up in the water, with only half of her head exposed. Lorna didn't seem to care. "What did you put in here?" Wanda smelled a hint of wine, which was amplified by the heat. "Peach and plum fragrance, a good wine. You drink some." Hodder stood up, picked up the tray, and poured Wanda some wine. She took a sip. Suddenly, her eyes lit up. It was sweeter than any alcohol she had drunk before. The witch drank a glass and asked for another glass. Her face was flushed. "This is delicious, like a drink, but with alcohol," Wanda exclaimed with her eyes wide open. She soon felt as if her body was being cleansed, and all of her aches and pains were gone. "Mr. Hodder, can I try some?" Lorna saw her sister drinking so happily and asked carefully. She also smelled the strong aroma of wine just now. "No, you're too young to drink," Wanda said sternly. "Drinking under the age of 21 is illegal." "I'll try it." However, Gwen had snuck to the side and taken a sip. After a few sips, she felt her face flush, her cheeks were hot, and her head was a little dizzy. "Okay, don't drink anymore." Hod quickly grabbed the glass from Gwen's hand. Although it can enhance physical fitness, according to his original idea, it is to absorb it through the hot spring. "Hod, give me another sip." "Just a small sip." Gwen swung and threw herself on Hod, her white and soft body pressed against him. Hod almost lost control. "Okay, that's enough." Wanda glared at Hood, quickly pulled Gwen away, and poured her some tea to calm her down. She had just seen the familiar expression on Hood's face, and she knew what he was thinking without having to guess. "But I still want to drink." Gwen's cheeks turned red, her eyes rolled around, and she rushed over to grab the wine jug. Hod shook his head, snapped his fingers, and banished it into the system. "Why did it disappear?" "Hod, you used magic to tease me." "Teach me how to use magic." Gwen suddenly remembered that Hod said he would teach her. "Next time, I'll show you another 1.3 this time." Hodder raised his lips, and a beam of light from his fingertips exploded in the air, and the fireworks formed the shape of Gwen. "Where's mine?" Wanda pouted and asked. Okay, you have one too." Hod also gave Wanda one. Lorna looked at this scene, hesitant to speak. She also wanted it, but it was difficult to ask Hod. She could only watch with eager eyes. Her little fingers kept hooking. "Hod, I'm hungry, can you get me something delicious?" Wanda rubbed her belly and spoke pitifully. "Okay, I'll go get some now." Wanda also wanted to eat something, so he got up and went out. Wanda pushed open the door with a bath towel on, and the next second he saw a familiar figure. His eyes narrowed, and he slammed into him, hugging him and pinning him against the wall. "Yelena, are you following me?" Hod was hugging Yelena. "I didn't, don't blame me." Yelena shook her head innocently. She wasn't crazy. She hadn't thought about following him since being warned by Hood last time. "What are you doing here?" Hood asked with a frown. Yelena didn't intend to hide it and told him everything. She came to investigate a strange incident and had no idea that Hood was here. Hood realized that she was not lying, and his eyes moved down to Yelena's swimsuit. The swimsuit with holes in different places made it look sexy. Yelena also noticed his gaze but was attracted by Hood's abs. "This guy has a perfect body." "Hod, what's wrong with you?" Wanda and Gwen heard the noise and trotted out in their bathrobes and saw this scene. Fuck. He had only been gone for half a minute. This stinky man hooked up with another one. Chapter 97. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hodder was caught off guard. Then he realized his position looked compromising. He hadn't thought about appearances when he moved. His only thought was to avoid attention. Okay, that's his real reason. It wasn't like he was checking out Yelena's waistline or anything. He awkwardly stepped back, wanting to shove his hands in his pockets, but remembered his bathrobe had none. "Honey, you seem pretty pleased with yourself," Wanda said, forcing a smile, her voice tight. Though she was smiling, Hodder could practically feel Wanda's daggers. "No, you've got it all wrong." Hodder quickly moved beside Wanda, gesturing. "This is Yelena. She's here to investigate the new case." Yelena just shook her head, a sly smile playing on her lips as her eyes flickered over Hodder's barely concealed chest muscles. Truth was, she was a little disappointed to break contact. Getting involved with a powerhouse like him could be interesting, plus, she'd definitely picked up on Hodder's vibes. The thought made her bite her lower lip. Wanda's expression darkened, her eyes narrowing. Okay, so Yelena wasn't exactly plain, and who knew if Hodder would fall for the forbidden fruit routine. And this flower definitely had an aroma, that lip-biting thing. "It's you." Gwen recognized Yelena, then glanced at Hodder. I thought you were keeping her a secret. Thought they'd worked together before, so Gwen knew Yelena pretty well. You two know each other? Wanda's eyes narrowed. She'd thought Hodder was making excuses, but Gwen knew her. Maybe she really was on a mission. Still, Wanda wasn't letting her guard down, possessively grabbing Hodder's arm to mark her territory. Yelena saw it all, throwing her hands up in a gesture of surrender and smiling wryly. Looks like her little move had ruffled some feathers. Why don't you come in and join us in the hot spring? Gwen took Yelena's arm. She hadn't seen Yelena in ages and naturally wanted to catch up in the springs. Yelena almost declined, but she glanced at Hodder and nodded, surprising herself. She wasn't sure if it was conscious or not, but she felt like she might be able to snatch something amazing. The more she learned about Hodder, the more she was drawn to the guy. Even though she knew Gwen was involved with him, she was still intrigued. Inside the springs. Oh, this is amazing, Yelena soaked in the water. As an agent, she could immediately tell this hot spring was different. It had a fruity, wine-like scent, and it made her feel incredible. Hodder, Yelena noticed him admiring the view and edged closer. What's up? Hodder looked at Yelena, puzzled, as she walked to the opposite side, then his eyes narrowed. He definitely felt something brush against his legs. One look at Yelena's face and he knew what it was, because the hot spring water was constantly circulating, with a bit of cloudiness from the minerals. Most people wouldn't notice, but he definitely did. This woman was flirting with him, right in front of everyone. As if sensing something, Wanda moved to Hodder's side. Sweetie, what are you two talking about? Wanda grinned, putting her hand on Hodder's waist and giving it a playful squeeze. She didn't know exactly what had happened, but she definitely sensed something was off, and Yelena's face, it was obvious she was excited. Nothing. Just talking about grabbing some dinner, Hodder said, twitching his lip. No way was he admitting Yelena had nudged him with her toe. If Wanda knew, the water wouldn't be pink, it would be blood red, and he wouldn't put it past her. Wanda was a powder keg ready to explode. Yeah, I'm starving, Yelena said, smiling knowingly. She stood, showing off her toned physique as she walked upstairs. Hodder couldn't help but watch. It was hard to look away. Like what you see? Wanda asked, her breath coming faster. This look was a little too obvious. Nope. Hodder would never admit it. I was just thinking about what to eat. That seemed to appease Wanda. For now, seeing that it was getting late, Hodder decided to lead everyone to the Hot Spring Villa's banquet hall. The food wasn't quite up to Hodder's standards, but they had a lot of unique dishes, like hot spring eggs cooked at high temperatures. The taste was okay, but it was all about the experience. Thanks for the hospitality, but I have to get back to business. Yelena stood, smiling. Even though she wanted to stay with Hodder a little longer, she couldn't forget her mission. Go get them, Hodder said, waving goodbye. Hodder, I'll clear the dishes, Lorna piped up suddenly, her expression blank. That's okay, the staff will take care of it, Hodder said, confused. They were VIPs, it wasn't like they were in the cafeteria. It's no problem. I'm used to it, Lorna said, and Hodder shrugged. Lorna's such a sweetheart, Wanda said, smiling as Lorna walked away. She'd noticed her sister wasn't the most outgoing. Unless she knew someone well, she didn't say much, and she always stuck close to Hodder, or at least within sight. She must have developed a strong attachment to Hodder after coming out of Hydra. Outside in the hallway, Yelena was about to leave when she heard footsteps behind her and turned. Buzz. Before she could react, a green light slammed her against the wall. She was lifted off the ground, and her eyes widened in panic. Lorna, hands glowing green, stalked towards her, her eyes cold. I'm warning you, stay away from Hodder. He belongs to my sister. Lorna's face was grim, her voice icy. The power in her hands intensified, her eyes full of murderous intent. If anyone was trying to steal Hodder, she'd take them out. She'd seen everything that had happened earlier. She'd just been waiting for the right moment, and her method was totally different from what they'd gathered from the underground lab. The file on Lorna said she could only manipulate very light metal. Nobody thought she could lift a person. Answer me, or you aren't going anywhere. Lorna said, her pupils fixed on Yelena, her eyes impatient. Okay, I won't take Hodder away from your sister. Yelena said, feeling the enormous pressure. and nodded quickly. She didn't have a choice, so she had to agree even if she didn't want to. No way was she getting out of this against a powerhouse like that. Good. Lorna released her, and Yelena hit the ground. Lorna turned and left without a word, opening the door to the springs with a cheerful smile. Hotter, I'm back. The speed of her mood swing was insane. You're back. Come sit down and watch me perform some cool magic for you. Hotter waved at Lorna, motioning for her to sit down. Okay. Lorna grinned, hurrying to Hotter's side. I'll put on a play for you. Hotter flicked his wrist, and the water from the springs turned into a thin line that flowed onto the table. The water slowly formed into little people with surprisingly detailed faces. Are those Thor and Loki? Wanda recognized the miniature people. She never thought Hotter would choose to recreate them. The illusionary Thor embraced Loki. I am actually an extremely hypocritical and cunning person. Loki struggled, looking at Thor. No, I'll tell our father about your heroic deeds, Thor said, looking at Loki with a pained expression. His voice even shook. No, I'm not doing this for him. The two of them put on a pretty melodramatic scene. The three of them were definitely enjoying the show, especially Wanda, whose lips couldn't help but curl up. Ding. Your performance has gained a loyal audience. Get reward, the power of ice element. There are actually rewards for this. Hotter thought to himself, his face showing surprise. He'd never imagined getting a reward for this. He'd done all sorts of dangerous stuff like mountain climbing, but he'd never gotten paid to act before. Guess I'm having a lucky day. 2 rewards, Hotter thought. He'd gotten a wine that could be infinitely refilled to strengthen the body. Now, he was getting the power of ice. Today was turning out to be very fortunate. Ice element power let you control ice and freeze everything. Mastering it would even let him freeze molecular structure. It was basically like being an Omega-level iceman. It could even freeze time. He also had the power of fire, but those attacks were very different. Why are you suddenly so happy? Something happened. Wanda could tell Hotter's mood had lifted, and it confused her. Hotter usually kept a pretty even keel. I'm honored you liked my performance, Hotter said, reaching out to pinch Wanda's cheek. It was as smooth as ever. His eyes drifted downward. This was a private space. After all, the bathrobe wasn't exactly closed tightly. Looking at Wanda's killer curves, Hotter suddenly felt parched. It's getting late. Let's go back to bed. Hotter waved, the water returning to the pool. Already? It's only 7. Gwen was disappointed. They hadn't had enough fun yet. She wanted to go back to the hot spring later. You. Wanda knew exactly what Hotter was thinking just from his gaze. She kicked his thigh under the table. The guy was always thinking about stuff, but they packed up and left at his request. The hot spring villa had lodging, but Hotter insisted on going back to the villa. The walls were paper thin, and he didn't want anyone eavesdropping. When everyone got back to the villa, it was almost 9:30, so everyone went to bed. It was still tiring after spending all night soaking in hot springs. The villa was pretty big, so everyone had their own room, even Wanda. Later that night, the door creaked open, a figure slipped in. Hotter, Gwen's next door. Wanda recognized him immediately and tried to push him away. Relax. Nobody'll notice. Hotter brushed off her worry. This wasn't his first rodeo. Next door, Gwen was drifting off to sleep when she heard a noise from next door. What was that? Panting. Was Wanda working out this late? Why did that sound so familiar? Like she'd heard it at Hotter's house before. The next morning at the table, Wanda came out, cheeks flushed, but her eyes showed fatigue. Gwen wasn't doing much better. She'd heard strange noises all night and had trouble sleeping. Gwen, Wanda, what happened to you two last night? Lorna was puzzled. They'd gone to bed early. Why were they so tired? Wanda, were you working out all night? I couldn't sleep. Gwen complained that Wanda had still been making noises, and it was hard to sleep, and the worst part was that the sound had a sense of rhythm, which made it even harder to fall asleep. Hotter watched with a smirk. Wanda glared at him and apologized. Sorry. I'll be more careful next time. Knock, knock. Just as everyone was having breakfast, there was a knock at the door. Who could that be so early? Hodder stood and opened the door. He saw a bald man and a serious-looking woman. I'm Nick Fury. Nick Fury was surprised to see a young man answering the door, and subconsciously asked, doesn't Wanda Maximoff live here? That he'd gotten the news yesterday. Wanda was in Westview, but why was a man at the door? Chapter 98. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wanda, some bald dude is looking for you. Hood, looking totally unbothered, spun around from where he stood and plopped back down at the table. He figured the bald guy was probably on another Wanda-finding mission. How else would he even know to show up here? It had barely been a day or two since she'd gotten a break, and already this chrome dome was knocking on their door. Nick Fury's mouth twitched at the description. He was the former director of S.H.I.E.L.D., for crying out loud. Who calls him a bald dude? He watched Hood leave, shaking his head and muttering inwardly. Bald dude's looking for me. Wanda got up and headed over, talking to herself as she walked. Where'd this bald guy come from? Maybe some fans had tracked her down. That would be me. Nick Fury gave Wanda a dark look, his already swarthy face looking even darker. Director? Wanda was surprised to see Nick Fury, of all people, was here, and Hill was with him. Long time no see, Wanda. Nick Fury offered a tight smile. Come on in. Wanda ushered them into the living room. She knew a visit like this meant there was some classified intel involved. Nick Fury walked in and stopped dead, seeing Gwen and Lorna, S.H.I.L.D., had files on both of them, so he recognized them instantly. He never expected to see them here together. One was a mutant Hydra used to experiment on, the other was Ghost Spider. These two should have been worlds apart, but they were sitting here. He couldn't make heads or tails of it. Gwen and Lorna were joking around with the guy who answered the door, like they were old friends. Added to Wanda, that made three super-powered people in one house. He eyed Hood, wondering what they saw in this ordinary guy. They just finished breakfast. Once they were all settled on the sofa, Wanda started the introductions. This is my good friend, Hood. Gwen's a friend, and this is my sister, Lorna. Wanda wanted Nick Fury to know they were all close, otherwise, he'd insist they talk in private. S.H.I.L.D. Information was highly classified, after all. Hello, Nick Fury said, keeping it short. If they were friends of Wanda's, he wasn't going to sweat it. Director, what brings you here? Wanda saw the serious look on Nick Fury's face and pressed him. She wouldn't buy that he came all this way for nothing. Besides, Agent Hill was here too. Hill. Nick Fury's face was grim as he straightened up and looked at Hill. Hill nodded slightly, pulling a tablet and a stack of documents from her briefcase. She turned on the tablet, displaying a strange image. A bunch of cultists were gathered in a circle, chanting something unintelligible. The location was dimly lit, so it was hard to make anything out. Then the picture went black. What is this? Wanda frowned at the bizarre ritual. Something was definitely off, even through the camera. It gave her a seriously bad vibe. The pattern on the ground looked like it was drawn in blood. We've recently discovered a cult holding some kind of ritual that seems to be connected to supernatural events. It's led to a lot of disappearances. As Hill spoke, she pulled some files from the stack and handed them to Wanda. Wanda scanned the files, her expression growing increasingly grave. It was a list of missing persons, and a long one, a thick stack of names. We came to you hoping you'd work with us and help solve this case. Nick Fury stated the reason for his visit. This whole thing was just too weird, and they weren't finding any leads. They had the video, but it didn't show much. The cult seemed to sense the cameras, making it hard to track them. That's why they specifically wanted Wanda's help. They hadn't gone to the other Avengers because this thing was so strange. Magic would be a big help, so Wanda was the obvious choice. Hood touched his chin thoughtfully as he listened to Nick Fury and Hill. Yelena had come to him yesterday, and she'd mentioned something about a supernatural investigation. In other words, Yelena must be looking into this too. Wanda hesitated. Before, she would have jumped at the chance, but she'd just spent some time with Hood and hadn't gotten much rest, and now she had to go on another mission. She wasn't thrilled about it. I know you just got a break, but we really need your help right now. We could call in other Avengers, but they don't have your magical skills or experience. Some of them are tied up with other stuff and can't get away. Nick Fury really laid it on thick, practically begging Wanda to help. This problem wasn't going to be solved by tech or brute force, that's why he'd come to Wanda. Wanda thought it over, then sighed, I'll go with you, but I'm taking Hood too. That if she went without him, she'd be leaving him here alone, he'd be out chasing skirts the minute she left. Gwen might keep him in line, but she was too nice to stand up to him for long. Besides, this cult thing sounded like magic, and Hood was a total magic whiz. She knew a few spells herself, but Hood was in a different league. If they could wrap things up quickly, she could get back to her vacation sooner. Take him with you. Nick Fury frowned, looking at Hood. That's not going to work. He'll just be a liability. In his eyes, this regular guy would only slow them down. Even if he had some skills, they wouldn't be much use in this kind of situation. Plus, Wanda would have to protect him. If Hood doesn't come, then forget it. Find someone else. Hood's my good luck charm. I'm not going without him. Wanda was getting angry. She could tell that Nick Fury thought Hood was dead weight, otherwise, he wouldn't have said that. Hood was the most important thing in her life now, and she wasn't going to let anyone put him down. Nick Fury didn't expect Wanda to react so strongly. Her voice was tight with anger. Fine, whatever. Nick Fury caved. If Wanda walked, he was screwed. He knew he couldn't handle this alone. They were depending on Wanda to save the day. Then meet us tonight. Nick Fury didn't want to hang around any longer. He wasn't leaving right away because the cult only seemed to operate at night. They'd have to wait until then to find clues. Okay. Wanda agreed. As Nick Fury turned to leave, he seemed to remember something. Forget the vacation, at least for a while. Do your homework. These cultists were more dangerous than they thought. They needed to be prepared. Wanda waved him off. As he climbed into the black SUV, Nick Fury turned to Hill. What do you have? I pulled the data on this Hood character from our database. He's an interesting case. A lot of extreme sports, a lot of trophies. He's also a major Stark Group shareholder, and a generous philanthropist. He's got a laundry list of accomplishments. In some ways, he's a genius. Hill was impressed as she scrolled through the information on her tablet. Still, he's just a regular guy. Nick Fury wasn't fazed. People like that were rare, but not unique. He was nothing compared to the Avengers. Hill could handle him without breaking a sweat. Do we need to do anything? Hill asked hesitantly. Wanda seemed really attached to this guy. Put someone on him, Nick Fury said casually, just keep him out of trouble. My sweet little witch is so kind and beautiful. Thinking about her mission even now. Hood came up behind Wanda and whispered in her ear, teasing. Stop it, it's not funny. Wanda turned, pouting. Are you kidding? I love a witch with a strong sense of justice. It's super attractive. Hood kissed Wanda and spoke softly. He didn't care about the mission. There weren't many things in the 9 realms that could threaten him. He thought of Wanda's mission as a part of their vacation. They were just having fun. He could teach Wanda a thing or two, pass on some skills. Wanda was strong, but there were plenty of people out there stronger than her. She couldn't learn to control chaos magic by studying alone. She needed to fight, and he'd be there to protect her. Really? Wanda's face lit up. She didn't have much time to spend with Hood. It always made her feel guilty. Definitely. It's about protecting others. Hood nodded seriously. He was lazy and didn't care much about protecting the earth, but it needed people like that. He could sit it out, but he wouldn't mock the people who did. Someone had to do the work. Wanda, I want to go too. Gwen walked up, looking upset. She thought she'd be invited along. Gwen, it's not that I don't want you to come, but I don't know if I can take care of everyone. Wanda had considered bringing Gwen and Lorna, but they didn't know much about magic. But I want to go, and I won't get in the way. Gwen grabbed Wanda's hand and looked at Hood with big, pleading eyes. I promise I'll be good. Wanda, why don't you bring them? They'll be bored here alone. Hood saw Wanda's hesitation. He didn't know Nick Fury, so Wanda had to make the call. Seeing Gwen and Lorna begging, Wanda gave in. Yes. Gwen and Lorna cheered. It's not even evening yet. How about we play some Parcheesi? Hood suggested a game. There were 4 of them. Parcheesi wasn't much fun on its own, but playing with 3 gorgeous women? That was another story. The winner got a reward. The loser got punished, and Hood almost always won. They played all morning. In the afternoon, they went to the fanciest restaurant in Westview. They went to Peach Garden and took a bunch of photos. Gwen and Lorna were having a blast. Wanda almost forgot about the mission. Until evening, night began to fall. Nick Fury and Hill, along with a few agents, were waiting in the agreed-upon alley. Nick Fury checked his watch. No one was there. Something must have happened. The cultists could have spotted them on the way over. Nick Fury was wondering if he should have Hill call Wanda when he heard her voice. Director Fury. 4 figures walked towards them. Nick Fury was about to chew Wanda out for being late when he saw the other 3. His already dark face turned even darker. Wanda, what's going on? Why are they here? Nick Fury forced the words out. They didn't have enough people to babysit. This was just a burden. Gwen was manageable, but Hood and Lorna. Useless. Director, I want them to come. Wanda stood firm. She'd already made up her mind. Wanda, you're... Nick Fury started to yell, but he checked the time and sighed. Just tell them to be careful. Time was running out. He didn't have time to argue with Wanda. If something happened, that was just too bad. Did you at least read the intel? Nick Fury asked. The information was vital to the mission. I was out playing all day. Wanda said without thinking. Nick Fury gaped. You were out all day? He was losing it. Director, the mission. Hill saw Nick Fury about to blow a gasket and jumped in to explain. We're staking out the Scree's place. We picked up some energy signatures there last night. Everyone piled into 3 cars. In the lead vehicle, Nick Fury said to Hill, keep an eye on that Hood character. Wanda was special. He wasn't going to let that guy cause trouble. Chapter 99. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Shijing Town, just outside the gated community with all the detached houses, 3 cars eased to a stop near the entrance. This is it. Nick Fury got out of the car, his hand drifting to the weapon at his hip as he scanned the villa. 2 days ago, we picked up some seriously weird energy readings coming from the Scroll's place. Hill, standing nearby, began her briefing. The other agents quickly moved into position to protect Hood and his crew. Their priority was the safety of Hood's team. Okay. Wanda gave a calm nod, her gaze flicking to Hood. In situations like these, she always looked to Hood first. He always seemed to know what was up. No sweat. Let's go in. Hood's tone was casual. As soon as he stepped out of the car, he'd gotten a read on the situation. There was a definite presence, an invisible black fog clinging to the villa. A nasty chill radiated from it, swirling around the place like a storm cloud. To the naked eye, though, everything looked normal, but one thing was for sure, this family was in deep trouble. Nick Fury's brow furrowed. He hadn't expected Wanda to put so much faith in some random guy's assessment, but they were here now, so they were committed. Knock, knock, knock. Fury walked up to the door and rapped, alert and cautious. It paid to be careful until they knew what they were walking into. After a short pause, the door swung open, revealing a middle-aged couple. The Scroll's faces were pale and etched with worry. Agent Fury. They'd been expecting him, and a wave of relief washed over them as they saw him. Let me introduce you to Wanda. Fury gestured toward Wanda in her crimson outfit. You're Wanda, the Scarlet Witch. Relief was plain on the Scroll's faces as they took in Wanda. They knew the Scarlet Witch was one of the Avengers. With someone that powerful on the case, they figured they were in good hands. Wanda noted that Fury hadn't introduced Hood and the others. She didn't let it show, but she frowned slightly. It was clear Fury wasn't taking them seriously at all. Please, come in. The Scrolls ushered everyone inside. Hood immediately began to take in the interior of the place. This single-family house had a vibe unlike any other, that was for sure. The decor was super retro, almost like a Native American lodge. Animal hides covered the floors, and a massive elk skull hung on the wall. Various taxidermied creatures were scattered about. The Scrolls were clearly hunters. Even the books piled on the table were about hunting techniques. Mr. and Mrs. Skrull, could you run through what's been happening again? Once Fury was seated, he got straight to the point. They'd been briefed, but things could have changed. Well, it started about 2 nights ago. The couple exchanged a look and began to recount their ordeal. Every night, just as they were drifting off to sleep, they'd started hearing whispers. The whispers sounded like some foreign chant. It was faint, broken up. They couldn't make out what was being said, and it wasn't just them. Their little girl heard it too. When they asked her about it, she said that someone was calling her name every night, telling her to leave. That's when they really started to freak out, not just for their daughter's sake, but because the voices were getting louder every night, like they were getting closer. The couple was visibly shaken as they told their story, their eyes filled with fear. If it weren't for their daughter, they would have bolted a long time ago. But they were trapped, and they could only grit their teeth and hang on. Don't worry. I'll protect you. Wanda's expression was serious. Something was definitely going on here, and she suspected magic. Dark magic could do some seriously messed up things, but they wouldn't know what was up until they dug a little deeper. We're counting on you. The couple was practically glowing with relief. Their daughter's safety was their biggest worry. Where's your daughter? I'd like to see her. Wanda asked. The problem seemed to be centered on the girl. She was the only one who could clearly hear the voices, so they needed to start with her. Of course. She's upstairs. The Skrulls quickly led everyone upstairs. They paused at a bedroom door, took a deep breath, and slowly opened it. Lying on the big white bed in the center of the room was a pale little girl. Even though the room was decorated warmly, it felt cold and unsettling. The little girl, Sarah, lay on her back, still as a corpse ready for burial. Sarah hasn't been sleeping well. It's really taken a toll on her. The mother hurried to her daughter's side, her face etched with concern. Her daughter had been having nightmares, waking up screaming in the middle of the night. Suddenly, Sarah's eyes snapped open, and she sat bolt upright. It's coming. The sudden movement made everyone jump. What's wrong? Wanda knelt beside the little girl, smiling gently and trying to reassure her. Sarah's eyes fluttered shut, and she sank back into bed, out cold. What happened? The mother asked anxiously. Why had she suddenly collapsed like that? Don't worry. She's probably exhausted from all the stress. I used a little magic to help her get some rest. Wanda tucked the quilt around Sarah. She'll sleep soundly tonight. The Skrulls finally seemed to relax a little. All they could do now was put their faith in Wanda. Okay, you two can go. The energy readings were strongest in the room next to Sarah's. Fury spoke up. He had had Sarah moved after the initial readings had been taken. After the Skrulls had left, he motioned for the other agents to bring in their equipment and start scanning. What do you make of all this? Fury asked Wanda. They didn't have much to go on, so he was hoping she could shed some light on things. I could feel that Sarah was agitated. Something's messing with her head, Wanda said, looking troubled. That was all she'd been able to pick up. It's an evil spirit. Hood spoke up, his tone matter of fact. And it's getting to her through Sarah. Evil spirit? Fury and Hill exchanged a look. Are you kidding me? Hill's expression was incredulous. Evil spirits? That's something out of a storybook, right? Even though there are plenty of weird legends out there, she'd rather look for a logical explanation. Mr. Hood, we'd appreciate it if you didn't fill their heads with nonsense. Fury shot Hood a glare. Having Hood around was already a pain in the neck. It was like he knew everything. Now he was just stirring the pot. He wouldn't say it if it wasn't true. Wanda wasn't about to let Fury push Hood around. She trusted Hood's judgment. Hood remained unfazed by Fury's skepticism. They were operating on different planes. He wasn't about to waste his breath trying to explain things. Why bother trying to talk to a brick wall? We're getting a reading. One of the agents called out urgently. Everyone's attention zeroed in on the instrument. It was going crazy, shaking and buzzing. At the same time, the light outside the window seemed to dim, like they were being swallowed by a thin layer of fog. No. The energy isn't coming from this room. It's the next one over. Fury realized with a jolt that something was wrong. And Sarah was next door. This thing was after Sarah. Fury and Hill's eyes snapped to Hood. "What are you looking at me for?" Hood shrugged. "I'd go check on Sarah if I were you." Fury snapped out of it. They needed to focus on Sarah. They charged into the next room. The sight that greeted them made their blood run cold. Sarah, in a white nightgown, was standing by the open window. The wind whipped her gown around her. "Don't!" Fury yelled, but it was too late. Sarah leaped out the window. Everyone rushed to the window, peering down. Sarah wasn't hurt. She was running away. Without hesitation, they took off after her. They couldn't let her get into trouble. The little girl was fast, but not fast enough. Then they saw something that made their jaws drop. Sarah's eyes were closed. She was sleepwalking, only she was moving way faster than any sleepwalker they'd ever seen. The evil spirit is making her sleepwalk. Hood sounded like he was having the time of his life, observing the situation with interest. "Should I web her up?" Gwen frowned at Sarah, who was still sprinting away. "It would be easy to take her down." "Hold off. Something's not right. Let's follow her for now." Fury shook his head. His gut told him there was more to it than that. Sarah seemed to know exactly where she was going. She was heading straight for something. If she was sleepwalking, she would have tripped over something by now. This wasn't as simple as it looked. They followed her into the woods outside of Westview. Sarah threaded her way through the trees and stopped in front of a rundown church. She pushed open the door and walked inside, her expression blank. "Hold on. This place feels wrong." Hood stopped them as they were about to go in. He'd been feeling it ever since they'd gotten close. There was something different about this church. It was shrouded in black energy, and there were figures moving around that they couldn't see. Reluctantly, Fury told them to hold their positions. He looked to Hill. "Scan the area." "Nothing." Hill shook her head, frowning. "Suit yourself." Hood spread his hands. "Go ahead and see for yourselves. Wanda, what do you think? Should we go in?" Fury hesitated. It was Wanda's call. "I trust Hood." Wanda's eyes were fixed on Hood. "Boss, if we don't catch up, she might slip out the back," the agent behind Fury warned. "Fine. Let's just follow them," Fury snapped. He couldn't afford to hesitate. "I wouldn't go in there if I were you," Hood warned as Fury started to lead the group forward. "Since when does the world's greatest super spy take advice from a kid?" Fury shot back, then led his agents toward the church. Hood shrugged, stuck his hands in his pockets, and stayed put. Seeing Hood's reaction, Wanda, Gwen, and Lorna stayed back as well. "Looks clear." Fury stepped into the churchyard, inching toward the entrance. Nothing happened. The scanners were clean. He breathed a sigh of relief. Maybe everything was fine. Beep. Beep. Suddenly, the instrument started blaring. "Trouble." Fury and Hill exchanged a look. At that moment, a dozen shadowy figures emerged from the graveyard outside the church and swarmed Fury and his team. The shadows were fast and vicious. "Damn it. No guns." Fury drew his weapon and lowered his voice. They didn't know what was inside the church. Guns would only draw attention to them. They managed to fight off the shadows, but not before their clothes had been torn to shreds. Hood clapped his hands as he approached. "Nice work, super spy." Fury glared at Hood. Chapter 100. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Nick Fury was surprised the guy guessed that. He wasn't much of a gambler, but he'd followed Sarah, and once he saw she was okay, he never expected to run into something so bizarre right away. He glanced back at the shadows on the ground, humanoid monsters with skin like dried jerky. If he hadn't figured out their heads were the weak spot, he might have been toast. Enough with the stalling. I'm already in deep. I'm going in there to see what's what. Nick Fury wasn't about to travel all this way for nothing. Besides, Sarah was still inside. If he didn't hurry, she might be long gone. Horde already warned you. You didn't have to come this way. Gwen looked annoyed. Even without knowing magic, she could tell the entrance had triggered something. Maybe there was another way and that wouldn't set off the monsters. Nick Fury started to argue but just clenched his jaw and shut up. Hood might be guessing, but he was right. Seeing Nick Fury move, everyone frowned and carefully approached the church door. Hood, surrounded by agents, was totally relaxed. Like he was sightseeing, seeing Hood so calm helped Wanda and the others chill out a little. The ancient wooden door was huge, at least 10 feet tall, judging by the weathering. It had been there for at least 70 or 80 years. Two agents cautiously stepped up and heaved the door open. Someone must be helping Sarah, or some kind of power was controlling her. There was no way she could have pushed this door open by herself. With a creak, the two doors slowly swung open from the middle, kicking up clouds of dust that had been settling for ages. A musty, rotten smell wafted out, making everyone wrinkle their noses. Inside were rows of wooden benches, probably original to the building. Many had rotted and collapsed. A giant cross hung on the wall at the front. Weirdly, it was missing half. The other half lay on the floor, decayed and moldy. Sarah's gone. Hill peered around, frowning. Even if they'd wasted 10 minutes, she couldn't have just vanished, and even though the church was large, the hall took up most of the space. A quick glance took it all in. I can't sense her either, thought Wanda frowned. She tried to feel her presence inside the church, but nothing. She wanted to broaden the search, but it wasn't easy to scan the whole place at once. Check the back door. Nick Fury sent 2 agents to the back. They returned quickly, looking worried. Director, we checked. It's locked from the inside. No way out that way. Thought if she'd left through the back, it would be open. What the hell is going on? Nick Fury looked grim. He really hadn't expected her to disappear. It didn't make sense. They'd come in through the front, but she wasn't here. Was this place haunted? He'd seen plenty of monsters, but nothing like this. Split up. Check the side rooms. Maybe she's hiding somewhere. Nick Fury ordered, gritting his teeth. It was all they could do. Everyone started searching the small rooms around the main hall, but Sarah had completely disappeared. Nick Fury's face darkened. Then Hood wandered over to the south corner and tapped his foot a couple of times. Stop looking. She's right here. Nick Fury rushed over with the others. Pry up the floor here. There's another room underneath, Hod said calmly, staring at the floor. Get it open. Nick Fury didn't know what to think, but the guy definitely knew something. The agents jammed their tools into the floorboards. With a heave, they pried it open. A square hole about 3 feet across appeared in front of them. It led to a stone staircase going down. The steps looked ancient. There's a secret passage down there. Nick Fury was embarrassed. They'd been searching for ages and found nothing, and this nobody had found the secret room first, made his agents look like a bunch of dummies. Let's go. Nick Fury took a deep breath, grabbed a flashlight, and started down. If there was a secret passage, Sarah had to be down there. Nick Fury and Hill went first, followed by 3 agents. Hood and the others went in the middle. Hod, how did you figure it out? Wanda whispered, leaning close to Hod. She tried to sense anything down there, but got nothing. Someone set up some kind of spell here to block you, Hod explained casually. The guy was good at hiding it, but not good enough. It would fool normal people, sure, but if Wanda really focused, she would have found the tunnel eventually. As they descended, candles suddenly flickered to life on both sides of the passage. The dim light illuminated the damp, dark space. It wasn't much, but enough to see by. Shoo! Nick Fury raised his hand in a fist, killed the flashlight, and whispered, someone's talking up ahead. The group stopped, and everyone could hear strange murmurs coming from deeper in the tunnel. The sound was unsettling, like it came from hell. You could just make out that it was a bunch of people chanting something. Let's check it out. Nick Fury drew his dagger and carefully led everyone toward the end of the passage. As they rounded the corner, they were met with a terrifying sight. A huge chamber opened before them, maybe 5,000 square feet. It was packed with people. They were all facing a stage, with their backs to the newcomers. Several cultists in black robes sat on the stage, muttering something. In this dark and deep night, when the stars are gone and everything is silent, I, your humble but loyal believer, in this place where shadows intersect, offer you my most pious respect and supreme sacrifice, the supreme demon nightmare. Your existence is like the most secret star in the night sky. Although it is invisible, it is everywhere, leading the lost into the deepest secrets of the soul. The black-robed cultist's voice was pious and insane, hoarse but sharp. Even though Hood and the others had arrived, the cultists didn't even notice. The people below kept their eyes closed, but their lips were curled in a smile. They were fixated on the cultists above them, as if they were gods. As the cultists chanted, their bodies trembled slightly, their smiles twisted into something weird, like they were seeing the things they loved the most. These guys are mind-controlled. Wanda frowned. She could feel it. They're holding a ritual. Hod looked disgusted, like he'd seen a cockroach. These guys would do anything to get what they wanted. Are they planning to sacrifice these people? Hill was shocked. They'd been wondering where all the missing people had gone. Here they were, pale and gaunt, like they hadn't eaten in days. Look, there's Sarah. Lorna, who hadn't said anything, pointed to a corner. At the back of the crowd, Sarah stood motionless, eyes closed, a smile playing on her lips. Facing the stage, she looked unsettling in her white nightgown. Take out those cultists first. Nick Fury ordered without hesitation. He didn't know what they were up to, but saving the people came first. He was about to charge when a beam of light fell on Nick Fury. The cultists on stage slowly stood and looked at Nick Fury and the others. The cultist in the middle raised a hand and pulled back his hood. Underneath was a dry, weathered face, like the bark of a dead tree. In the dim light, it looked twisted and terrifying. The old man's lips curled in a smile, and he spoke in a hoarse voice. Well, well. What brings you here, dear guests? You're messing with the wrong people. Let them go. Hill pulled out his baton and glared at the old cult leader. Ha! You think you can tell me what to do? The old man grinned, a sinister expression that made your skin crawl. He clapped his hands, and black mist exploded from the center of the magic circle. The mist burst upward and outward, like a boulder hitting the ground. When it cleared, a huge scorpion stood before them. It was pitch black, and its sharp stinger twitched, ready to strike. Nick Fury and the others recoiled. A summoning spell. Hod looked intrigued. He stroked his chin. He hadn't expected the cultists to surprise him. Not many people could use summoning spells, and these cultists were stronger than he thought. Go. It's just one scorpion. Nick Fury took a deep breath, gripped his dagger, and prepared to charge. Even if the scorpion was 10 feet long, they might be able to handle it. But then the scorpion's legs buckled, and it roared. Suddenly, the ground erupted with smaller scorpions, tiny, swarming things crawling toward them like a black tide. Swish. Gross. Gwen shuddered, her face pale. She couldn't stand seeing so many bugs. Without a word, she leaped onto the wall and started spraying webs, trying to block them, but the scorpions kept coming. Only a few were caught by the webs. They were nothing compared to the swarm. Shoot. Nick Fury stopped caring and pulled his pistol. The other agents did the same. They hadn't wanted to use guns at first, afraid of hitting the civilians, but now they had no choice. Shooting the ground would sweep away swarms of scorpions. Crap, we can't kill them all. Nick Fury looked grim. No matter how many they killed, more kept coming. The ground they cleared was instantly covered again. It was like a black wave, and the sound made your scalp crawl. They hadn't expected so many. Wanda. Hill looked at Wanda. They couldn't handle this many scorpions. Only Wanda could stop them. Ha! Wanda's body glowed crimson. The light raced across the ground toward the scorpion swarm. When it hit, the scorpions seemed to burst into flames and were gone. Phew! Thank God for Wanda. Nick Fury sighed in relief. Without Wanda, they'd have been done for. Guns were useless against so many tiny things, like trying to kill mosquitoes with a cannon. Chaos magic. The old man's eyes gleamed. Great! If I sacrifice you to Lord Nightmare, I'll be richly rewarded. He'd never expected such a prize. He raised his dry hands. Lord Nightmare, grant me supreme power, and I will offer you the magic of chaos. Black mist gathered in his hands. Then it burst from above his head. The mist was mixed with evil spirits. As it spread, you could hear their screams and roars. Damn! Faced with the attack, Wanda frantically pulled back the crimson light and blocked it with a shield of energy. Boom! The mist hit her, and Wanda recoiled. It was stronger than she thought, and the scorpions were coming again. We're done for. Without the crimson light, they were helpless. Back off. Hod said calmly, stepping forward. His hands flashed red, and fire blazed to life in his palms. The whole room was lit by the flames. A torrent of fire roared from his hands, engulfing the scorpions. The terrifying flames were tinged with dark red light, and the old man was blown away. This guy, Nick Fury was stunned. Wait, he really could do something. Wasn't he just some normal guy?